Good day and welcome to Presence. What we're going to dive into today is how do you deal with change and with endings in your life? It's a natural part of life, and yet we all resist it. My co-host is with me, Holly Duckworth. I'm Ravi Tangri. Hi there, Holly.
Hello, Ravi, and hello to our listeners and our viewers around the world. It is the first Friday in September.
Yeah.
How does this happen? Speaking of changes and endings, we're in the middle of one right now with certainly that summer season breathing its last breath on us as we step into the fall, or as we like to call it here in America, pumpkin spice latte season.
Okay, you've been Starbucked.
I have not been Starbucked, but I did get that email about getting in line first. I mean, talk about first world problems here. You can now get a special pass to get your pumpkin spice latte earlier. I don't know, Ravi. I just don't understand sometimes these people and their coffee, but it's true. Fall is here. Life is changing.
Coffeeholic here.
Coffeeholic here. Well, we do make this a coffee show. So if you're not driving or you're hanging out at home, we'd love for you to grab your cup of coffee and join us for this chat today. For the month. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say that just to remind people that you can go on iTunes and download this show, so you get it right on your devices. As soon as it goes live, we put it live within probably about half an hour of the show. Also, you can go on YouTube, search for me and Presence or Holly, and you'll be able to find all of our Present shows. And of course, find us on Facebook, and we post the show within about a half an hour of finishing to record it. So we'd love to have you here live, but if you can't, please join us and please spread the word, because we count on you to help us connect with other people who are of like mind, like value to you, who would also appreciate this.
Yes, indeed. So the show is called Presence, and I think it's a good time. This is show 8 to circle back on that. Why we picked presence. Presence being our energetic resonance, the way we show up in the world. And so every week we explore how are we choosing to show up in the world so that we can lead in our businesses and in our lives consciously, and just live a conscious life, because we know, as we've practiced being present, fully available, fully aware beings, that we find our lives tends to flow a little bit easier. So on the show for the month of September, we're going to take a little bit of a different path. And Ravi and I have selected a book called The 5 Things We Cannot Change and the Happiness We Find by Embracing Them. And this is by an author that I've had the opportunity to talk with a little bit, and his name is David Richo, and he's also written a book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. So the combination of the books, I think, is a really great fit. Here's kind of what it looks like. You can grab it on Amazon if you're watching live. Otherwise, it's a tan and blue book, Dave Richo, The 5 Things We Cannot Change and the Happiness We Find by Embracing Them. So each of the next couple of weeks, we're going to take some sections of this book and talk about what if we embraced change? What if we learned curiosity and to love this concept of change? So this week is Everything Changes and Ends. Next week, we're going to combine a couple of the concepts. We're going to talk about life does not always go according to plan, and life is not fair. And as you know, on a previous show, Ravi and I talked about that. We're not a big fan of Plan B. We're a plan of flowing with what is. So we'll talk about that next week. And then on 9/16, we're going to talk about my favorite word, yes. Yes. We're doing 3 shows. We're doing 3 shows back to back on say yes to life, say yes to your feelings, and saying yes to who I am. So if you are committed this month, and certainly into the end of 2016, we're all the way to Q4 already, to making your own conscious transition, becoming more present in your heart, in your head, in yourself, and the combination of the presence of who you are. We want to invite you to be a part of this conversation through this particular book. So this week, life's filled with opportunities. We need to think about not only what we want to change, but what isn't going to change. What is that thing that is constant in your life that is, as David Richo defines it, a recurring or occurring continuously over a period of time? Because when we can accept those things, it opens up the door to being more happier. So what do you think about that, Ravi?
Well, the thing is, I find a lot of stress comes from beating ourselves up over what we can't change, right? Over what is. And, expecting something different. If something is going to be the way it is, do we invest time wishing it could be different, or do we move forward? This is what is. Let's go. Let's not. If it's not changeable, if there's something that's not changeable, why are we putting energy into that, right? And I think that's where we take ourselves out of presence, because we're wishing things were different. We're wishing, and if it is what is, how can we breathe into it? It may not be what we thought we wanted, but what I've learned is that a lot of times the universe gives you what we need to get to what we want, and it may not be the path that you intellectually planned.
Yeah, the opening line of the book, it says, the first given of life is that changes and endings are inevitable for every person, every relationship, every enthusiasm, or everything. Nothing is perfect, permanently satisfying, or permanently anything. And I think, as again, we picked this show title, Presence, is how do we become fully present in the moment? Because we know it is the law of life that this moment is going to end, this experience is going to end, and so the moment versus the why does this have to end? Why is it happening this way? Why? We become fully engaged in the feeling nature of that moment.
Well, and I think people get attached to what is and want it to stay. And it's not always. The funny is, actually, Holly, can I ask you a favor?
Of course.
I'm hearing, okay, it seems to have cleared up. I was hearing an echo. Anyway, I was saying, I was going to get you to log back in, but it's cleared up. I'm not hearing the echo. People hold on to what is, and it's not only the good stuff. I've had friends, I've had coaching clients that fight irrationally to hold on to the biggest caca you would not believe. And people talk about the comfort zone. I don't believe in that, because a lot of times it's not comfortable. I call it the familiar zone. We fight irrationally sometimes to hold on to what is, instead of acknowledging that it can go. And it's not just letting go of the things that are good. People will fight crazily to hold on to stuff that's messy. In a work relationship, okay? Let's say there's a lot of changes you've been through in your workplace. There's a lot of people out there who are beaten up by all the corporate change that's going on. And they, even if nothing has happened significant like that in the last 5 years, they are still living in all of that. They're still carrying it. They haven't done the work to process, but they don't want to let go of the pain. They don't want to let go of the discomfort, even if the environment has changed, because that's what they know. Other times, someone goes through a divorce, and if it's a messy divorce, years later, they may still be living in that. It's like the relationship's over, it's done, and yet they're still carrying all that emotion, that pain, the betrayal, all of that, because it's what they know. And this whole thing about change and endings, I think it's not just letting go of the good stuff. It's being letting go of the bad stuff, which we will fight to hold on to just because it's what we know. And that, in all my coaching work and in the work with discovery and so on, I found that's the biggest challenge, is people willing to let go of the caca so that they can open to the amazing stuff that's within them.
Yeah, Rico, in the book, he mentions there's a section here on grief. And I will only speak on my behalf around grief. But as I've experienced the world, I think we have big taboos and big woo-woos about grief. We can't go there. We can't talk about grief. And yet, he says in the book, grief, the yes of tears, makes it possible for the acceptance of a reality and its conditions, including and ending in death. And I think, in this case, we can read that word death as as a broader scope of a word. You know, death is an ending, not necessarily death as in, you know, I'm now alive and I'm now dead, but you know, death of a project. We talked in the prep work for the show that sometimes we have to grieve that maybe we've, you know, in our work, we've come up against a project that we've been maybe dove into for a couple of years, and we're very excited to be a part of this. I was a meeting planner for 10 years, and one of the projects I had the honor of working on was the State Farm U.S. Figure Skating Championships, and we put years of efforts into it. And I have to say that when we had our post skating championship party, there was definitely some grief and a little bit of tears there that accomplishment we had been able to complete. So in the book, as we look at things changing and ending, it is an invitation to round out our edges around words like grief. Is grief really bad, or could grief be the celebration of that next new project? And certainly in my career, I've had many projects come and go. You and I have both written books that have, you know, called us to new conversations, and yet you're relieved when it's over and you're kind of grieving. Now what am I going to do? I think that's what fall invites us to do as well.
Well, one key thing you said is you at least had a post-event party to do a closure, right? What happens too often in this work is we finish a project, bam, we're on to 6 more. We've never had that closure. So it's like what some people call an open loop, or, you know, all that project's open and we haven't put closure, the grieving, all of that to put an end to it. And how can you, when things close, actually create some closure? And a lot of times we're too busy at work to do that, but it's critical. I mean, I did a lot of work in the 90s with the Department of National Defense, with the military, teaching them how to question the rules. And once there was a squadron that stood down, it was shutting down. And that was a significant thing. They had, in the war room, they had this giant head of a moose, right? Mounted, and when they stood down, they took that head of the moose and they had a full dress regalia, full honors, procession and funeral for the moose head. It was their ritual to put their squadron to end it, right? There's another organization that went through massive trauma with bringing in, I don't know why, they brought in both a new hardware and a new software system. And one of the things I got them to do, once they actually managed to work through all the difficulty of that, rather than just going on with the next thing, we took all of the old computers, took everyone, which are useless, took them out to the parking lot, gave everyone a sledgehammer, and they beat the living daylights out of them. It was a way to vent the frustrations and let it go and say, okay, we're done. Let's move on, right? How can you create some sort of fun ritual, or it may involve more grieving, to be able to actually put closure? I mean, there's things in personal life. If there's a death, yes, you need some grieving, but also I truly believe in the Irish wake. Let's celebrate the life, right?
This weekend in America, we call it Labor Day weekend, and it's the official end of summer. And that's the way race consciousness, or our collective society, closes out on one season, and we symbolically throw our kids back into school and start back. Is Labor Day is a little later in Canada, isn't
No,
it?
it's same weekend for us, first weekend in September, first Monday in September, same thing. So it's for us the same piece about, as you say, this is the ending. So this is the last, big barbecues and all. Fall's great, but this is the end of summer. So how can you create that ritual that lets you feel some sense of closure? Because if you don't, actually, you know what was my biggest aha about closure? Years ago, I was doing rock climbing. And we would go hike up to the top of a cliff, we would rappel down, and then we'd climb up. And the thing that amazed me, the aha I had, was in work. We were constantly working. We never closed, because by the time a project finished, we were on to 3 more. Here, I climbed up, and you know what? You got to the top. That feeling when you pulled yourself up on the ledge felt amazing. And so it's, how do you create that feeling of, yes, I've actually gotten somewhere, versus I'm just struggling?
Yeah, I would invite readers, as you're diving into this book with us this month, there's a whole section here called Growing Older, the Changing Image in the Mirror. And in this section, David Rico talks about how psychologically we've created an ego challenge. That's, you know, that voice in your head that, you know, we need to get older and this is what it means. And this is, you know, so that's all society's words. And I think we're living in a consciousness now where the definition of that change in the mirror is changing who we are. And he's, you know, what if we celebrated with curiosity? We're now in a new phase of life. And if we're going to start to practice this book, the 5 things in life we cannot change, and the happiness we get by embracing them, I think embracing that life changes in the mirror, in us, in our lives, in the mirror of our work, in our business, then we get the opportunity to celebrate with curiosity the new phases in our lives. And that requires this unconditional yes that we're going to talk about near the end of the month. But I really love the line, we worry because we do not trust ourselves to handle what happens to us. And in the show, we're always talking about how we have our personal responsibility, I translate that in my mind, ability to respond to how worry might impact us or how these changes are going to impact us. So our spiritual work, here it is, page 11, our spiritual work is to live more fully in the present moment. And that requires that inflow and that outflow of the breath that we talk about over and over again, because even every breath changes and ends. It's the inflow changes with the outflow, and our life and our work mirrors that over and over and over again. And when we just honor that, hey, we only have this moment, it's absolutely amazing and perfect. Oh, yeah. And this moment is too. And this moment is too.
You know, and when you say about the mirror, that who in the mirror is changing, there's so much in our society that resists that. There's judgment that comes in. Oh, there's more wrinkles. Oh, there's more, you know, padding. Oh, there's, and not who I was. And the moment you're into that, you're not present. You're in your head, and you've left the moment, right? You've lost consciousness, basically. And, you know, we talk about leading and living consciously. The moment you're thinking, oh gosh, there's more wrinkles. Oh gosh, I'm, you know, I've got it sounds kind of funny, but it actually is true. You've lost consciousness.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about that line, more padding, Ravi. my consciousness is still back on that word.
Right. But instead of just breathing in and breathing into who you see in the mirror, because this is who we are now. And that it's the judgment takes you out of that.
On the show every week, we like to bring forth a tip or two that people can actually activate. And because I pre-read this book in preparation for the show, I want to bring in a tip now, because I've been trying it as I read the book a few weeks ago, and that's uncovering curiosity. And every show we always pull out a word and we get really clear about defining it, because we just always assume we know what a word means and how we're gonna go through with it. And curiosity was a word that I certainly thought I knew, but it wasn't a word in my common everyday vocabulary. And yet, if we're going to accept that everything changes and ends, which is the premise of this chapter, I think we need to activate a tip, which is activate your own curiosity. Instead of going to fear and controlling, what if you ask yourself, I'm curious about what my life will look like. I'm curious about what my family will look like. I'm curious about what my job will look like as I take upon this new project. That energetic feeling nature that we know is so powerful as present and conscious beings on the planet empowers us to get out of fear, step into consciousness, step into faith, and create with the universe some sort of curiosity around what we want it to look like versus the fear of letting it go.
Well, and I think that leads into the concept you mentioned when we were planning the show about the saying yes, building an elasticity, right? When we say yes, that curiosity builds that connection, that sort of rubber band you talked about, right?
Yeah, I was at a board meeting recently, and someone talked about when we're curious about where a project in our life could go, and we say yes to that. We're, as human beings having a spiritual experience, we actually invite the entire universe, all the people in that room, all the concepts, all of life to support us in making that happen. And the analogy that my friend made was, when you say yes, it's like you create a rubber band between where you are and where you're going, so that all of those resources, money, time, breath, health, consciousness, people, can show up to make that a reality. A few weeks back, I did a 14er. We'll probably talk about this for the next few shows too. And that started 3 years ago when I moved to Colorado. I said, hey, and I've got to do all the things Colorado people do. And one of them is hike a 14er. A 14er, for those of you who aren't from here, is hiking to the top of a 14,000 foot mountain. It's crazy. But I 3 years ago said yes to, I'm going to do a 14er. And over the course of 3 years, that the water backpack and the hiking boots and the guide and the people to support me and the brain consciousness that I needed to shift, that it was possible for me to get dirty, because I'm not really a dirty, I don't like to do outside stuff, all came into alignment so that I could have this experience. So as you are looking at your fall, or you're looking at Q4 in your life or in your business, think about what's the rubber band that you want to move towards. And if you open your curiosity, your willingness, see what will show up in that. A business example, I'm gonna bring this one in. Ravi, I don't know if you've had a chance to see this, but I have a lot of fear in adding some executive coaching and new speeches to my project. And so this week I did a little meditation, put it out there. What am I supposed to do in Q4? And threw out an email to my list, and it says, 4 things I'm going to do before I turn the big 4-0. I'm going to contract $40,000 in speaking. I'm going to write 40,000 words of my new book. I'm going to contract 40 days of executive coaching and speak to 40,000 or more people in my 40th year. And I put that out there with humble vulnerability, in the absolute acknowledgement that everything changes and ends. And my 30s are ending. My 40s are beginning, and this is a way that I created that rubber band between me and all of the people that it's going to take to allow me to serve with my words, my speaking, and my executive coaching. So that was the acknowledgement of something is ending, and the curiosity about what new can show up. So as a tip this week, it doesn't have to be something as big as what I just shared, but what's that thing in your life that you want to create a rubber band with, and start to place that into, okay, I'm good with this ending. I'm willing to create something new.
And that also, let me make explicit, creates a huge vulnerability for you to put that out, right? Because it does take that. It's about opening yourself up to the yes. It creates a vulnerability. The other caveat, the tip maybe I'd offer to that, because I'm conscious for time, is that as you're saying yes and opening the rubber band, what are you going to say no to? And this is the closings and endings, because a lot of people have difficulty pulling away from stuff if they said yes, even if there's no energy there. You know, it's just, I should do this, or I have to do this, and you're forcing yourself. And the trouble is, if you keep saying yes, 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 you're creating a lack of direction, a lack of focus, and so you're getting unfocused results. And also, the other thing you're potentially doing is implosion. I mean, you talk about a rubber band, the metaphor that came up for me. If you haven't seen this, go on YouTube and just search watermelon rubber band, where they could put one rubber band after another on a watermelon. And then after a while, the watermelon just implodes because there's just too much pressure. One of my mentors told me that when you say no, that's what gives power to your yes. So in terms of the endings, if you're saying yes to something, usually means you have to say no to something else. So what are you going to say no to? And that's the challenge. We analyze and rationalize why we've got to do something. But if there's no energy, if there's no passion, are you truly being productive, still doing something that may have fit months ago or years ago, but no longer is who you are? Are you living in the familiar zone versus where you truly want to be? So, that's the key. So
I'm going to add here from page 17, evolution is about love. So often evolution's about fear. That whole no thing you just said, Ravi, I don't know. You want me to say no to something? But yet when I do it from that place of curiosity and love, it's honoring the endings. It is as it is. And we're going to hear throughout this book, when we honor it is as it is, what it is, we get to step into that next natural evolution.
Yeah. And building on the show we did a couple of weeks ago on intuition, it's about intuitively, as you grow that, where does it feel that it's not serving anymore? The yes is no longer serving. It's just become rote. So, and for me, I follow the energy, right? So the one thing that we should do is, we're just coming up on time. Do you want to speak? As you said earlier, we're combining 2 themes for next week's show from the book, right? And exploring it. And so we've rebranded it, if you will, into our own little bit.
Yeah, and I'm going to just add one more tip. I know we're on title.
Okay, cool.
That last tip is build community. That if we're going to do this work in presence and awareness and consciousness, I love this last quote, and I think it's a great tip for us to practice this next week. In spiritual consciousness, we never give up on anyone, not even ourselves. So as you start to practice these principles, build a community around you. Email Ravi, call me, text me, get involved in these conversations that are happening, because so many of us are awakening to what is possible while it's new, and some things are ending and falling away, new things are showing up.
And community can be physically around you or virtual. And for those of you, actually that links to, for those of you who live near me in Halifax and Nova Scotia, I've just launched a meetup group that's called Presence, How to Live and Lead Consciously. And we are actually going to have a meetup, our first one on September 14th, where we're going to get into some of these themes. We're going to talk about next week's show, but also the getting to yes piece, and explore these in a more deep way. So, again, please remember, you can connect with us on iTunes. You can download these podcasts every week so you have them right away. You can get them on YouTube, and also with Holly and me on our Facebook pages. Holly, do you want to just tell us a little bit about the next week's show and what we're going to be focusing on then?
So next week's show, 9-9. If you're into numerology, I invite you to have fun with that. 9-9.
Yeah.
And the show is going to be life does not always go according to plan, mashed up with this idea that life is not always fair.
It's not.
We move forward as conscious, present, spiritual beings in that flow of when life happens. So join us for next week's show. It's going to be absolutely fun, and we've got lots of great tips already planned for.
Yeah, and we're putting our own little spin on it. We're saying how to deal with Murphy's Law, basically. Good.
Murphy's Law. When it happens, it happens. What are we going to do about it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you to you guys for tuning in, and we shall be catching you next week. Give us some feedback on Facebook, on Twitter, and as I said, please, if you found this of value, please share it with people you know, because that's how we pass the word. Have a great weekend, everyone. You too, Holly.
Bye.
Bye.